Real. Okay, excuse me, we're gonna start. Sorry.
Is Sandy gonna be the chair?
No, I am.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to the Wednesday, September 17th, 2025 meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission.
Have it full screen on.
We'll go ahead and start with where's, I guess, okay, yeah, introduction of planning commissioners. We'll start with Commissioner Casino.
I'm Eric Casino. I serve at large and I live in the Lacey UGA.
Bill Fishburne, I live and serve in District 4.
Sandy Kaiser, I live and serve in District 3.
Barry Halverson, Yelm, Washington, District 2.
I'm Scott Nelson from District 4. We'll go to our commissioners online.
Commissioner Bumbarger, District 1.
District 5.
Commissioner Bartlett, District 5, live in Humboldt.
I think that's Commissioner Pestinger with his hand
On the
up.
left, yeah.
Okay.
He dialed in.
310.
So Kevin Pessinger, District 5, point of order.
Yeah,
So we need to appoint you as chair.
So moved.
Second,
any discussion?
Aye.
All those in favor?
aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay,
What are the-
so can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 2020, from August 27th and accept the audio as the official record?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
Aye, I have a discussion.
Okay,
It looked good to me. It was really detailed notes and really appreciated. I just had a question for Commissioner Casino. If the end portion of it that referred to comments he made was accurate. The last paragraph.
Are you talking about line 32 on page 4?
I think so. I don't have it in front of me.
Where it just says, I seconded the motion, a discussion took place. The motion passed with 6 votes in favor and 3 opposed.
No, I'm not talking about that. Is that the last thing that is on there in our main
Yes.
meeting? Yeah, it was maybe the discussion right before that. I don't know. It just seemed like you would disagree with it, but
What is the
if
topic?
you're fine with it, I'm fine with it. The characterization of the discussion.
Now you got me concerned.
You're good with it? I'm good with it.
I don't even
don't even see your name anywhere else.
there's line 7, there's.
Yeah, line 7 on page 2.
I think
Yeah,
there
page
may be
2.
some confusion that we're looking at the August 27th meeting minutes, not the
Perhaps.
September 4th.
Oh, that is definitely confusion. I thought we were on September 3rd or whatever.
No, we're on the,
No, we approved the August 27th meeting minutes.
Okay, my bad. I didn't hear that.
I don't have a copy of the September 4th.
We did,
I don't either.
So
so
what's the one we received in the packet, in the email? I've got 9/3/25 PC minutes from yesterday at 4 p.m. Are we approving those today?
I don't have a copy.
I don't know, let's get through the 27th first.
All right.
Any discussion on August 27th? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now, September 4th, I do not have a hard copy in front of me,
I don't either.
I don't either.
so. I'm going to suggest that we hold that off until our next meeting. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, we will move on to public communications. Let me get. Thurston County Planning Commission welcomes comments from the public at all meetings. Please introduce yourself, including the address you reside at in the county. Please address the Planning Commission, not the audience or staff. The Planning Commission may not respond to public comments. Speakers are limited to a total of 3 minutes. The timer will show on one of the video screens to help keep track of time. Meeting attendees cannot donate their speaking time to another person. No comments that are lewd and offensive, inflammatory, hateful, defamatory, or discriminatory in nature. No comments that are commercial in nature. All materials provided to the county may be subject to release pursuant to the Public Records Act. Remarks on projects that have already had a planning commission public hearing will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. We will start here in the boardroom. Then we will take comments from those joining online. For those on Zoom who wish to provide comment, please choose the raise your hand option to address the Planning Commission. You will be promoted to a panelist when it's your time to speak. Anybody in the boardroom wish to address the Planning Commission?
Do we have Commissioner Passenger with his hand up?
Forgot to lower it.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Blessing. I live in Alpine Hills in unincorporated Thurston County. I appreciate your work on the CAO and that you're addressing wetlands. And one really interesting thing with that is we kind of think this big wetland buffer protects like certain species that live in wetlands. However, a lot of these very special species live in kind of artificially made or man-made structures called ditches, often with deferred maintenance. And I want to let you know that those ditches can be like hold water and hold Oregon spotted frogs in the summer. And some of them, those ditches aren't necessarily in wetlands, but they have water. And Department of Ecology is trying to figure out how to do permits for ditch management things under water resources, state waters alteration permit. And I think it might be relevant to your CAO discussions at some point. And this was a letter about how ecology might I'm just passing off a letter to actually about how ecology might address wetland permitting and ditches. Okay, in one site specific situation. Okay, thank you very much.
And we can make sure to get this out to the planning commission. Don't worry, you won't be making any decisions tonight, so you don't have to. We'll just make a copy. Is it okay if we take that copy, Bonnie?
What?
Is it okay if we keep that copy?
Yeah.
We'll make a copy and send it out.
Right, my name is Jessica Grubb and I've been a resident of Thurston County for most of my life. I live at 7733 Kerbau Road Northeast in Olympia. Between 1999 and 2016, I personally built 5 homes, each impacted in some way by Thurston County's Critical Area Ordinance. In addition to being a longtime property owner, I've worked as a real estate broker for more than 17 years, guiding countless clients through the purchase and sale of vacant land while navigating the complexities of the CAO. I also serve as a planning commissioner for the city of Olympia. From both personal and professional perspectives, I have consistently found the interpretation of the CAO by Thurston County planning staff to be challenging. Property owners are often required to spend thousands of dollars on expert studies in biology and geology to determine appropriate land use as required by law. Unfortunately, planning staff have frequently questioned and disregarded these professional reports, sometimes halting projects entirely or delaying them for months while interpretation of code are debated. This practice, where a non-specialist overruled credentialed expert, is not only inefficient, but also unfair. Another issue is the inaccuracy of the mapping tools used by the county. As a real estate professional and property owners, we rely on those maps during initial evaluations of land use potential. When maps incorrectly indicate extensive wetlands or buffers, the property is immediately devalued, limiting how it can be used or sold. This directly impacts the property's property owners' financial well-being. By contrast, neighboring counties such as Lewis and Mason are significantly easier to work with regarding their critical area regulations. I have personally seen clients choose to purchase property outside of Thurston County due to difficulty in navigating our process. As a planning commissioner, I also recognize that the city of Olympia looks to the county as the larger jurisdiction, often modeling its own CAO policies and practices accordingly. This amplifies the impact on how those rules are interpreted and enforced across all of the jurisdictions in Thurston County. I fully support the use of best available science in protecting critical areas. At the same time, we must balance environmental stewardship with the urgent need for housing. Our region has faced a housing shortage since 2008, and every jurisdiction is falling behind in meeting projected housing needs for our growing population. To address affordability and availability, we must thoughtfully reduce barriers to responsible development, streamlining the CAO process, ensuring consistency and respecting expert science. It's time to cut the red tape. Only through this balanced approach can we both safeguard our environment and provide the housing opportunities that Thurston County residents so urgently need. The only way to bring pricing of homes down is to build more homes and create more inventory. Affordability is currently a pipe dream for many of our residents, and I hope you guys use the advice of some of our wetland biologists in our county that work with the planning staff in rewriting the CAO. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, anybody online? We have any hands up? Okay,
Oh, there's Yvonne.
there's Yvonne. Can you promote Yvonne to a panelist, please? Anybody else that wishes to address the planning commission tonight? If you do, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm gonna say that nobody's interested tonight, so we will move on to new business, work session number 1, introduction to CAO update.
You wanna get started with it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just open this up. This is actually this is a pretty big deal. Y'all are moving from comp plan world to critical areas ordinance, and I think Ms. Grubb framed it really well. You're moving from higher level policy to regulations, which impact what people can do on their property. And that's what the critical areas ordinance is. Tonight is really just a foundation layer. What is a critical areas ordinance? How does it, like, what are our requirements under state law? And really more about how we'll be approaching it. I will say that this is a set of regulations that exists within our code and, you know, haven't really been touched for 13 years. And so a lot of the confusion that exists is because a lot of it's outdated. There's stuff in our code that isn't even backed up by the state anymore. We've got stream typing that doesn't align with how DFW looks at their streams. And so as you talk about updating maps, well, we need to update the code to reference current data so that we can then have current maps for both our staff and our community to use. So today really is just a primer. We welcome anyone who's gonna be providing comments on this as we move through it. But we just want to celebrate this milestone and transition from higher level policy to probably the biggest section of our code in terms of regulations on people's properties. I think it was actually, sorry, just one more thing, 70% of the permits that we process are related to environmental protection, either through the Critical Areas Ordinance or the State Environmental Policy Act. So this really is a big deal. It's going to touch a lot of people, and you're probably going to hear from a lot of folks as we get deeper into it.
Do a lot of those revolve around the pocket gopher?
Nope. So now that we have a habitat conservation program, that's a much easier permit. You can essentially come in, identify the area you've impacted, and there's a mitigation fee and whatnot. But I'll let Claire sort of dive into what it does cover. Because there's plenty of other things that will trigger a critical areas review for an individual.
Yeah, so what we'll be going over tonight, we'll talk about the purpose and function of the CAO. We'll look a little bit at the history and kind of the timing of this update, what this update can do, what it will do, a little bit of what we already know about the scope of the update. We'll talk about what the review process here at Planning Commission is gonna look like, and get both the commissioners and any of the public who are tuning in prepared to get started with community engagement. So right now we're at the very, very beginning. No major decisions have been made. The only things we know are set in stone so far, what we know the state is requiring of us in this update. State mandated requirements are the only thing we know for sure right now. We're engaging really early on this. We want Planning Commission and the public to inform the scope of this update right from the start and get people involved in the update right from the beginning. The main purpose for the CAO update is to comply with new state requirements and the new best available science. As Ashley mentioned, the last time we updated was in 2012, major update. There's been minor ones since then. Was 2012, a lot in the world of environmental science has changed. The state and their approaches and requirements have changed. And in general, the state requires us to make regular updates to the CAO to keep up with these things. So the ordinance itself regulates development in sensitive areas of the environment. So it's intended to balance the use of property with environmental protection and human health and safety. The 5 areas that the CAO deals with directly and protects are wetlands, frequently flooded areas, habitat areas, geologically hazardous areas, and aquifer recharge areas. And we'll go over what each of those are and how the ordinance interacts with them.
Is that list of 5 areas mandated by the state, or can that be larger or smaller?
That list of areas comes from the state. They all have specific definitions in state law. We are required to identify and protect and regulate those 5 areas specifically.
We do have latitude, or at least the last time we did an update, there was the latitude for local governments to protect habitats and species of local importance if they chose to do so, and there's guidelines for all of that in the law.
Yeah, and there's some other examples of things that are specific to Thurston County's critical areas ordinance that don't necessarily exist in other county or city. Mima Mound, high groundwater zone.
So the first one of those 5 is wetlands. Oh, sorry, didn't see it.
Yeah, see on here, the last major update on this was 2012. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah, there's been minor changes since then, but that was the last big one. So the first of those 5 areas are wetlands. These are areas of land that are regularly covered by water or that regularly have their soil saturated with water. Wetlands specifically usually support special kinds of plants that grow in wet conditions. The functions of wetlands include things like providing habitat, maintaining water quality, mitigating flooding, stabilizing shorelines, and maintaining aquifers and stream flow. So they're very important for water quality and quantity on top of providing habitat and other functions. This map is to help give an idea of the extent of wetland-related areas in Thurston County. This is specifically areas within 300 feet of a mapped potential or confirmed wetland area. So this is generally the areas where a wetland review is going to be required for permitting.
Yeah, actually it's 400 feet.
Yes.
So the way the code reads right now, the maximum buffer around any of our identified wetlands is 300 feet, but individuals are required to get at least a preliminary review by wetland biologists if they're within 400 feet. So when someone comes to our permit counter, we're gonna go deep on permit review. When someone comes to the permit counter, they'll pull up a parcel map, they'll use this as the base layer, and then they'll use a measuring tool to go out another 100 feet. And so I think this is just a really good, you know, you'll see there's a lot of properties that would be subject to some kind of critical area review permit.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Does the buffer depend on the type of wetland, or is it just, it's always 400?
400 feet to take a closer look at it to trigger some kind of critical area review. So then you hire wetland biologists and you'll see as you start digging into other county codes and agency guidance, there are different levels of reports that would be required. So at a minimum, a reconnaissance, but most folks need to get a full delineation to figure out what that buffer is.
Yeah, and that's at the point at which you would know what the actual final buffer for development is.
Yeah, and I think we have upwards of 20 different buffers in our code.
It is an extensive.
It's a
table,
lot. And so in looking at, you know, current state guidance in other jurisdictions, some of the complexity just comes from the number of different buffers that would apply.
Yeah, and those are based on things like the quality and habitat function of the wetland. So the next of the 5 critical areas are critical aquifer recharge areas. These areas help maintain groundwater quality and quantity, which is very important for our region. Most folks around here get their drinking water from groundwater. These are areas where surface water, like rainwater and other things like that, can infiltrate back into groundwater. Disruptions to these areas might cause drinking water to become contaminated or to limit the supply. So whether there's actually contaminants on the surface or it's too much impervious area preventing water re-infiltrating, it can affect both the quality and quantity of groundwater. This is a general.
Question?
Yeah.
What percentage of Thurston County is not critical aquifer recharge area?
I don't have a number, but this map gives an idea of the area. So most of Thurston County is some type of aquifer recharge area. There's really just some areas in the South County here that are not mapped with any. The colors on this map indicate the level of sensitivity of those groundwater recharge areas. So the darkest purple areas on here are the most sensitive. That means water is infiltrating quickly and there's not a lot of barrier to it getting back into the aquifer, versus it's going slower in those lighter pink areas.
Thank you very much.
And the areas that are white, are we looking at prairie or what is it in the South County there?
There are a lot of prairie areas down there. This just depends on the soil types in general.
I think that's outside of, I
aquifer.
think you're getting into hills up there.
Mm-hmm.
So like to the left is Michigan Hill.
Right, okay.
And then you're sort of that area like Skookumchuck. And so, yeah, the forested hills above there.
Is the port not included because of a jurisdictional issue or because it's actually not in a CARA?
That one little white
That little white
section.
spot.
White spot, like right up
It's not our
there.
jurisdiction. No.
Well, this goes into things that aren't our
Yeah, I
jurisdiction.
know.
I think it is just because it's not
Maybe it's landfill and.
providing for
It's
groundwater.
paved over.
Definitely Phil.
Yes, it's not a quality source of our aquifer water. All right, the next area is fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. This one, I think especially for Thurston County, encompasses the most variety of environmental features. So this includes habitats for endangered or important species. It can include those species of local importance. Areas that support fish and shellfish, kelp and eelgrass beds, waters of the state, and all water bodies that support fish habitat. And then we also have some non-water oriented ones in Thurston County, Oregon white oaks and some of the parts of those landscapes associated with them. Riparian areas along streams, rivers, and shorelines. And riparian areas are specifically transitional areas between water and dry land. They tend to support both the aquatic habitat and the health of the dry land around it. So we have 2 maps for this one. This is some of those dry land as opposed to water-based fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas. So this map includes critical oak habitats and grasslands, areas for our priority habitats and species, and prairie soils areas, which support rare plants of local importance.
So where the HCP intersects with some of these, at this point, given what the critical areas ordinance provisions look like, someone may just need a habitat conservation permit. There are areas, like you'll notice west of the Black River, we've got Mima Mounds over, that's where the Mima Mound Preserve is, glacial heritage is, there's prairie soils there. They're not subject to the HCP necessarily. So they would have separate prairie reviews because there isn't another mitigation option.
Commissioner Bartlett had a question.
Yeah, so just to clarify, when Andrew was mentioning species of special interest, that is included in this?
Yeah, I believe this includes, because the oak and prairies are species of local importance.
The oaks. would
Great.
be-
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Mima Mounds are called out as a prairie feature, but not protected as a separate feature, if that makes sense.
But they're under state protection already as part of DNR.
Mounds, they're features of other things.
There is a natural area preserve that
Yeah.
DNR maintains, the
Yeah.
Mima Mounds Preserve, but
Yeah.
the mounds
They're-
exist outside of.
Oh, I see.
that
Yeah,
area.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of them are
Sorry,
preserved,
peer
but there
review.
are lots of them on private property too. Yeah.
And I think to Commissioner Bartlett's question, it's helpful to frame and remind folks that, you know, we're just giving an overview tonight and we're gonna have several different conversations with Planning Commission about the contents of the CAO and the
Yeah.
contents of the Fish and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Areas. So
Yeah.
giving an overview as to how that all works, how a county might want to designate a species or habitat of local importance, and then taking the Planning Commission through that decision process and welcoming that input from the public is all still to come.
And just to get an idea of our aquatic habitats under Fish and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Areas, this map includes rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, and shorelines. Shorelines are managed separately, so that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is not part of the Critical Areas Ordinance update. It won't be in the scope for this. The Shoreline Master Program is its own separate project with its own regulations, but it does interact with CAO. And most of the folks who are going through any kind of shoreline permitting are probably going to go through critical areas permitting as well. Because they so frequently overlap with things like fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, wetlands, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and sorry.
I was just, since S&P covers wetlands, why would we cover wetlands in CAO?
They cover wetlands that have an intersect with the shoreline, but
Okay,
you
so
have
we're only gonna
wetlands.
be doing wetlands that are not intersect or have a nexus with the shoreline? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And another thing I just thought of that, some of the commissioners here may remember that you worked on a critical areas ordinance update that specifically applies to agricultural uses. So that also would not be included. So agricultural activities, since we're a voluntary stewardship program county, do have a different relationship and different requirements for critical areas.
The next one is frequently flooded areas. These are areas that are particularly prone to floods and may present a danger to human life and property. These are areas with a 1% or greater chance of flooding each year. Another way you might see that described means the same thing, is that they're in the 100-year floodplain. Areas with within the highest recorded flood elevation and areas with high groundwater hazards are considered flood areas in Thurston County.
Let it go until we deep dive that.
Okay,
Maybe.
yeah, and we'll deep dive individually on each of these. And you will help determine how deep those dives are, if they include, so, yeah. This map is a general indicator for where our flood areas are. There's a lot of different colors, so there's the FEMA flood zones, which are the 100 and 500-year floodplains, FEMA designated floodways, and then also our high groundwater hazard areas. And if you consider all these maps together that you've seen so far, it makes sense that at least 70% of our permits have to touch critical areas in some way.
We call them unicorns. If they come
Yes.
in and they don't need a critical area review, it's like they get a unicorn
Yeah.
sticker.
And geologically hazardous areas are areas where conditions or structure of the soil or earth create a potential hazard for people or property. These are areas at risk for landslides, erosion, volcanic lahar flows, and seismic soil liquefaction. The ones that are gonna come up the most often there are landslides and erosion. And that includes areas like marine bluffs. So this map includes hillshades, so that gives you a sense of where the steepest slopes in Thurston County are. If you are interested in this one and you would like to see where the actual designated steep slopes are, you can do that on the county GIS. It's just not visible at this zoom out layer, so we did hillshade instead for this map. And then some of the colors you see on there are specific, known and labeled geologically hazard areas like the Carlian and Nisqually Bluff landslide areas, and then that orange hatched area is a lahar hazard area. Okay, talk a little bit about permitting. So the CAO primarily applies through development permitting. The way that it enacts on Thurston County is when somebody would like to build something, do something to their property, change something physically in the environment. They come to us to get a permit to do that and are told they need to get, usually up first is just the CARP, the Critical Areas Review Permit. That's the standard critical areas permit. Is performed anytime a development proposal has the potential to impact a critical area. We use our GIS maps to make that determination, usually at the front counter here, and let people know they need to do that. And then when they submit that, county staff has a chance to go and review any necessary reports, review the proposal for the project against the CAO and make sure it complies. These are conducted at the beginning of a project. The CARP comes with a cost to the applicant of $696 in permit fees. They tend to add a few weeks to the review timeline for a project. It also depends on the complexity of the critical areas.
Did that timeline get factored into the shot clock on issuing permits then?
Yes, so the CARPs have the completeness review and then the 65-day review timeline.
Yeah, they're a separate permit from anything else that people might get. So if you need a fill and grade and a building permit or whatever else, you'll get those separately, but none of that gets issued until your CARP is good to go. And we encourage people to do CARPs early to avoid surprises is how it's currently set up. Yeah, to obtain a CARP, applicants submit their preliminary site plan, property information, and then sometimes they have to do critical areas reports up front, depending on the type of critical area, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes we're able to just keep them moving without actually having to send someone out. A lot of things, especially wetlands is a big one, they have to do that up front.
Do you know how long it takes for staff to review CARPs on average now?
We are meeting the timeline set by the state. We're not exceeding them though. So most people it's like a 3-month minimum to get a CARP review, which is better than we were. But it's minimum 3 months to get through a critical area review permit. And it's difficult to review the building permit concurrently because if anything changes, then we have to re-review the building permit. So
If a 3-month review is $696, is this a full cost recovery thing or is this not
it
even
is,
close?
it's the, it's not that it takes 3 months to review, it's the number of CARPs that we have to review. So we have
It's 3
hundreds
months to get
and
to
hundreds.
the-
So if you think, so if you think about that map, and almost every single application requires a critical area review permit, then we are reviewing hundreds and hundreds of them. And so we have 2 planning techs, that's pretty much their full workload. So they're meeting the deadlines barely. We're gonna be honest in here. The Critical Areas Ordinance for too long has been just like, it's tough. And I think the Planning Commission, for you to make a solid recommendation, we just need to be honest about what our property owners and our staff had to go through, what level of environmental protection we're currently getting, what we could get with the new state guidance, best available science. And they're two different things. Like you can have environmental protection with clear guidance for permits. And you can have, I mean, it's not like having clear guidance means you have less environmental protection. Right now, we do not have clear guidance for folks.
Could we, in this scoping or in this process, would we be able to make recommendations to be able to have a third-party reviewer, like a professional report do CARPs for us? So if an applicant says, I don't want to wait the 3 months for staff to get around it, go hire a consultant to put together a CARP instead, just like we do with an arborist or.
So they do. So like, I
Okay.
mean, the reports that come in, so there are new administrative procedures to address Ms. Grubb's comment, to essentially establish what that review looks like when we're requiring a third-party report. So yeah, I mean, we are using third-party review.
Okay.
If a project can't avoid critical areas, so the CARP is for something that is gonna be placed generally near a critical area, and it just ensures that it's not interacting with that critical area, not going into the buffers, not disrupting it. If that cannot be avoided, because of mostly Supreme Court decisions, people need to be able to reasonably use property that they own in this country. So we have what is called a reasonable use exception to allow people to establish reasonable use of their property when they're up against limiting environmental constraints. This type of permit allows property owners to exercise their right to reasonable use while avoiding impacts as much as possible. So they do have a requirement to minimize impacts. And it's important, it's how we balance that property right to reasonable use with environmental protection. So RUEs are more difficult to obtain than just the standard CARP. In addition to that county staff review, RUEs are also reviewed by a hearing examiner who accepts and reviews public comments and holds a public hearing. So there is a public element to an RUE because they do usually involve some level of disruption to a critical area. The baseline cost in review fees for RUEs is close to $5,000. And they generally take anywhere from 6 months to a few years, depending on the complexity of the project and the responsiveness of the applicant. Something to think about when you hear that kind of review timeline, is that yes, it's on our plate frequently, but a lot of the time when it's expanding out beyond years, it's because the applicant is devoting time with it back on their plate to research or to, whatever steps they need to take care of on the project.
Is this where we could maybe add in another process for an administrative RUE instead?
Yeah, a lot of other jurisdictions have more tools in the toolbox for potential mitigation or, if there is some kind of disruption to a critical area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've thought about and looked into. We do have like a preliminary audit of our RUEs to see which ones would, based on the tools other jurisdictions use, like how often would we be using an administrative RUE and.
Yeah, the big thing, and this will fall on your shoulders as a planning commission, is as soon as you create some kind of administrative process, you need very clear standards. Both the public needs to know the criteria staff are using, and staff need to know the criteria that they're applying, standards they're applying. So in those cases, you really want to identify trends, like, okay, we've got 20 RUEs we have processed over the last however many years on this, and every single time, here are the conditions that the hearings examiner placed on it. Well, maybe you can turn those into standards, but just a word of caution, you can't just create a new process without also then putting in those safeguards to ensure the environmental protection and that clarity for staff and the public.
I would think that at some point, a lot of the same issues come up repetitively. And so building in a process for these shouldn't be insurmountable. I mean, I understand that we'll have to have some real specificity, but I know that, I don't know if anybody else here has done it, but I've done a reasonable use exception here in the county before. And from my perspective, it was ridiculous would probably be the best way to describe it. And so I think if we could do anything to make it a little bit easier and still, I mean, the whole idea of it's supposed to be reasonable. And I think most people actually recognize what reasonable is until you get into the bureaucracy and like, wow, that just didn't work out the way I thought.
Yeah, one of the things that the audit kind of can't capture is how many people have elected to not move forward with a property or project because of the
Yeah, and I know
process.
some of those people are like, it's not worth doing anymore.
Yeah, and some of those lost projects might be where the administrative process, if we decide to do one, could help. Yes. Okay. So talking a little bit about the history of the CAO updates and what we know will be part of this one. So as we mentioned, the last major update was in 2012. There's been a few minor updates since then. And the state requires that jurisdictions update their CAOs regularly. So we're approaching 15 years since the last major update. There's a lot of new scientific research out there. Thurston County has also grown and changed, and we've got all kinds of feedback that has come in over the years from folks who've been navigating these processes and permits. So currently what we know will need to be in the scope as just like a baseline from state requirements is any new requirements that are coming out of the Department of Commerce or other state agencies. So they regularly put out publications. The Department of Commerce has checklists that they use. The state also requires that we stay up to date with the current best available science. We will also want to make sure that the CAO update aligns with our habitat conservation plan, shoreline master program, and the comprehensive plan policies. I know that we've just spent a lot of time this past year working on the comprehensive plan, so making sure that the CAO is reflective of that work is going to be really important. And as we've been discussing already, improvements for ease of implementation and permitting. And an important part of building clarity into that permit process and making the code easy to implement is that it gets implemented more efficiently, more often. People come get those permits more often instead of asking for forgiveness, and it's consistent and fair. Some things that are not part of the scope or any changes to the comprehensive plan. This is just a code update. So there's no policy level changes happening here. This is a development code update. With these being development regulations, when they go into action, they need to have a nexus to the development impacts of a specific proposal on a specific property. So they're very granular as opposed to a broad policy approach. And they need to be proportional to the types of impacts that happen when people do development. So they're very grounded in what is actually physically changing on the land, what are the numeric development standards that go with that. It's a lot more granular than something like the comprehensive plan, which is very policy oriented. So we're also not going to be looking at any other code sections outside of Title 24. Title 24 is the home of the CAO. It's the entire CAO. That's the area that we're looking at. We're also not going to be thinking about urban growth areas with this update. As part of a separate process from this, we're looking to adopt by reference or develop UGA CAOs, lots of acronyms, to suit the zoning and development standards that we have adopted in the UGAs. And this is part of the strategy to allow the county to meet the goal of 5% rural population growth. The difference in those CAOs, that code needs to align with other types of development regulations that apply. So in the county and in the UGAs, those development regulations and density requirements look different.
Yeah, and this is one of the things we've been finding, a lot of our subdivisions within the UGAs, they can't even meet minimum densities when you apply a rural CAO, or just a CAO that wasn't developed for those zoning codes. And so, because the cities are all updating all their housing and everything right now, we really want to wait and see what their zoning codes are going to look like, what their subdivision codes are going to look like, because there was even legislation that changed subdivision law for cities and areas of UGAs before we even think about what the CAOs would look like for those areas.
So will we see these UGA CAOs when we're doing building development code joint planning? Or is it going to be, we're just going to take the cities?
It'll be through the joint code update.
Okay.
And joint codes, there's a lot of different ways to approach it.
Mhm.
We are exploring some kind of adoption by reference of, at a minimum, the housing sections, because the legislature is not gonna stop with housing updates. They're gonna keep coming and we can't keep up. And a lot of the changes that they're implementing at the state level affect the UGAs as well as the cities. So this is something we've been talking with the city planning directors about, like how do we just manage to keep up with state law?
Are we still planning on starting joint planning in 26?
We will, so joint plans were largely updated
Yeah.
just 2 years ago, but any changes related to housing, and then the implementing ordinances, and the broader joint codes will be 26. We have to wait for the cities to be done.
Okay. 'Cause I mean, it's kind of what you already said, but the sooner we can get these UGAs into urban CAOs, the better off we'll be.
To achieve our housing goals, yes, the subdivisions I've seen while I've been director, it's difficult for them to even meet minimum densities once you apply our subdivision standards and critical areas ordinance provisions. And the way the RUE works, it's just to get you to a minimum. It won't necessarily get you to a maximum density.
Oh, with the threshold?
The threshold is the minimum necessary. So what we're finding is there are applications for RUEs to just achieve minimum densities. And so if you really want to protect the rural area from growth, you need to allow development in the urban area or the UGA. And so what we've been trying to keep an eye on, given all the comprehensive planning discussions, as our these permits are going through, it's like, well, are we even getting to the minimums? And the comments we're getting back from the cities are like, help, help reach higher densities so we can meet our housing goals. So we've got to be creative about the strategies and take a more holistic.
So in an RUE, by minimizing the environmental impacts, that then triggers a threshold of minimum development necessary to make the project work.
Pretty much. I mean, like in a very simplistic way. I mean, they're all different.
Yeah.
But
A good example is someone who has a small constrained lot and they want to build a 3,000 square foot home, and
Yeah.
the hearings examiner says, you get a home is reasonable use, but that footprint's gonna be half or less of what you wanted.
And so when you think about subdivisions, they don't have a lot of choices in terms of where the infrastructure drives the layout.
Yeah.
And in most of the cases, they are requiring RUEs for the infrastructure.
I guess what I'm getting at is I don't want the answer from the RUE to be as soon as you hit it, the reasonableness is at the bottom of the floor.
It's the way the criteria is written.
That's kind of what a reasonable use exemption is.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
to get you to the bare minimum of use of your property.
So they can make
But
an
it does-
argument
yeah.
for minimum density, like to achieve the minimum density of this zoning district in the UGA, I need this RUE.
Yeah.
But if it required, a further buffer reduction, you can't get to that level. But what we're finding is our CAOs are very different than the city CAOs.
Mhm.
So, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
So say some of those things too, we can tweak those dials to, there can be, maybe your buffer is one thing and administratively staff can reduce it a certain amount under certain circumstances that are clearly laid out in code. So to meet some of those needs, and then if it needs to go further than that, that's when you get into RUE. And I think all those sort of dials and where those settings are gonna be on the table for discussion.
Yeah.
With planning commission, to hear from the public and for the board as well.
And it's gonna be important, and what Claire is probably gonna get into, so I hope I don't steal thunder, is we're really gonna start with just what is current agency guidance? Because current agency guidance is not what's in our CAO. So rather than spending a tremendous amount of time trying to get you all to be CAO experts of Thurston County. We really want to just have you spend your time looking at what is the current best available science, what's current agency guidance, and then even sharing what other counties have done with their CAO updates. These are state mandated updates at this point. So just like we were the second round of counties to do our comp plan update, we're the second round, part of the second round of counties to do the CAO update. We don't have to do it blindly. There's a lot of other great work that's just been done in the last year and a half. And we want to capitalize on that and use it as a starting point.
Could you characterize, Claire, I know we don't need to go into all of it now, but just generally what the new state guidelines are telling us to do that we haven't done in the past?
There's so many. Every one of those 5 critical areas has its own set of guidelines. And some of them we have started researching more thoroughly, some of them, like there's still room to go on researching. A good example might be something like DNR has recently released much more advanced landslide mapping data and information about landslide hazards. And so that might be something where we compare how we currently manage landslides as a geologic hazard with that new advanced, it's like LiDAR scan, like it's cool data. So we might compare that to either the data if we do specifically reference a certain map or piece of information, which can happen as far as like how critical areas get identified. That might be something that gets updated, or just making sure that the types of standards that we use match up with what DNR is saying about landslides.
Yes, like building off of that. So there's the new mapping. It would be great if we could just refer to new mapping, but then if you look at the report requirements, like the specialized reports that we require for landslide hazards, the report requirements in our CAO don't speak the same language as the new mapping that DNR has released. And so it's like, we can't just do a simple like, we got a new map.
And
Nope.
that's why this is such a big update is, because it's not just those simple like insert new data here. It's, well, is the language describing the type of information we review aligned with the type of information that is being discussed in the most recent guidance?
Yeah, and another, I see we have someone from WDFW that was on earlier. That's another area where there's a lot of new guidance about site potential tree height. So we have stream typing that when I found out doing the voluntary stewardship program monitoring report, I couldn't get current data from WDFW on the way like the stream typing we use in our critical areas ordinance. They no longer support it.
So the way things are even categorized, if I tell someone you have a type NF stream and they go look for information from WDFW, there's a disconnect.
So figuring out the new stream typing, making sure we have maps of that, and then also looking at how site potential tree height guidance may be applied here.
How many different agencies are going to have to be involved in this, or that we need their seal of approval before we can adopt? Is there gonna be, because I know like SMP ecology was kind of.
Ecology, DNR,
Yeah, but ecology was the one
DFW.
that finally,
Commerce is gonna be the one that's whether they accept it or not, right?
Yeah.
so Commerce is gonna be final say.
They likely have a checklist that we'll need to make, like, did you
Yeah.
incorporate the newest ecology guidance on wetlands? Did you do the new DNR on whatever? But I'm thinking that's how it's gonna look.
Yeah, but we'll be proactively working with all of our state
Yes.
agency partners as we do on everything. Just as we're trying to involve planning commission early, we'll be involving them early as well.
What state agency do Claire?
I just go back to the SMP, which is not back to the commissioners yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, no, not that kind of, more like calling, asking questions, getting
Yeah, I know, but
feedback.
even getting approval of our shoreline master plan.
It's not the same as a master plan.
It doesn't have
It's
to,
far simpler.
it doesn't have to go through that official.
Yeah,
Um,
Commerce doesn't have to approve it. I think I might have mischaracterized that.
Okay.
It's, we
Yeah.
adopt.
Commerce
When it's
has
approved
requirements
by
for
the
us, but
Commissioners, it's
yes.
approved.
Correct.
I think pretty much state agencies will have had their say already.
Yeah, there's required touch points like SEPA, but we won't wait for that. I don't wanna get that far down the road. And then all of a sudden find out we're missing some big piece.
Do you feel like that all these agencies that are gonna have a say on it, their latest and greatest guidance is current?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Current.
that's one of the reasons that it's a mandated update right now is Ecology has all brand new guidance on wetlands. They have, and I think Claire did an excellent job in the staff report of starting to build that reference library. So both for the planning commission and the public, there is a number of links and references for each one of the critical areas. And I would encourage you, it's great late night reading. Just start clicking on those links and reading through.
Who do you want to be? You can pick whoever.
Yeah,
you
I
wanna
think
be.
one of the biggest, most exciting ones is, there's like a new 2-edition manual on riparian areas and what it means to designate riparian areas
Holy
and
cow.
with the buffers. There's a whole one just about like what they are and how they work. And then there's the whole policy recommendation manual. These are both like 400 pages long. So, and these are recent in the last couple of years. So it's a lot of information. A lot of it is very recent. And a lot of it is different because it's new. And so that's part of the scope of this is not just reading that and then trying to make a code that matches it, but also identifying touch points and bigger questions to bring back here and bring back to the public, because they're even within, and this is just the nature of science, even within those documents, there are still choices to be made about how things are managed when that science starts turning into policy.
Yeah, like Ecologies is the best example. They have 2 different ways to establish buffers for wetlands. We'll make sure that both of those are brought before you, that there are clear questions, that we find examples of 2 different communities that have integrated those. We can always do research to those communities, figure out how's it working. Because like I said, we're in the second wave, which means we've got all the first wave counties we can call up and bug.
Are these all the first wave counties here?
Those are some of them.
Okay, Whatcom, Skagit, Kitsap, Pierce?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily all of them, but I think
Okay.
as far as Western Washington goes, those are some of the ones that have done theirs.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're naturally kind of moving on to the scoping process itself here and what this next phase of public engagement through planning commission is gonna look like. So our goal with public engagement and with starting it this early and just throughout the whole project in general is to provide accessible, accurate information to help the community understand these laws and regulations, seek input from a broad range of individuals and community groups early and throughout the whole process, understand community viewpoints and concerns and the planning commission's priorities, and leverage the knowledge and experience of our key regional partners and subject matters, and that would especially include tribes. So there's a lot of folks, as we've already mentioned, state agencies, local groups, tribes, other jurisdictions that we'll need to engage with. I've actually already heard from Puget Sound Energy. They're interested in this process because they do so many permits with us that deal with critical areas. So we have all kinds of wonderful planning partners to tap into here, as well as just our public and planning commission here. So the process moving forward from this point specifically for planning commission, next time we come back, we will present a draft schedule, and it'll basically be broken out by those topics that we've kind of already covered today. So here's when we want to talk about wetlands, here's when we want to talk about habitat areas, here's when we're talking about permitting. We'll run it by you guys to make sure that we allot enough time and effort and focus into the priority areas. Some of these critical areas are sort of naturally more straightforward than others, but also we don't want to assume where those priorities lie and where that effort should go. So that's a part of the intent of the engagement early here. And then after we make that schedule and then are following it, staff will present the agency guidance, examples from other counties, and those policy decisions like the example we just gave. Would you like to use wetland model B or wetland model A? How are we going to approach this, get feedback on that, and then go back and develop that code and kind of do this step combined engagement and code development process.
Yeah, so you're not gonna see code for a while, at least not draft code from us. Really wanna have conversations around the agency guidance and sample code from elsewhere to help just ground the discussions. And then we take that back, we draft code, and then we bring it back to you for review. Make sure that we've hit the mark and have incorporated your feedback. That also allows for lots of public comment. So if we put together a schedule ahead of time that sort of lays out when we think we're gonna be covering different areas of the critical areas ordinance, our listening public or folks that wanna engage will then be able to engage in a more meaningful way instead of trying to track every planning commission meeting and, you know, digesting lots of information just to prepare.
In the past, we've done some work with crosswalks. Is it? No?
I think what we have is so far off the mark from current guidance.
Yeah.
It isn't going to be as useful. If there's a section where you think it'd be helpful, like by all means, but to crosswalk the whole thing.
I'm talking about present guidance from the county CAO, current agency guidance, and then examples of other counties.
A detailed crosswalk would be really hard. Other than like this, the whole way we look at landslide hazards is no longer supported. It might be like as simple as that for some of them. And then others, yeah, it'd be hard. I'm just going through sections of the CAO in my head right now, going like, how would we do that?
Well, I'm just trying to think then, how is the current CAO being used if it doesn't meet agency guidance? It's current ordinance for the county, but
It's
that's
current, it's
outdated.
current regulation, so we have to rely on outdated maps, and what ends up happening is that those maps become screens. So we basically say, we have a screen that says there's a stream on your property, but you have to hire a consultant to tell us,
That it's not there or that it's there.
or it's there, and what are the functions and values of that critical area? So all that to say, it's really important to get it updated, to make sure that we are adequately protecting the environment while having like good, solid information for our property owners and staff. Although there isn't, the 2026 deadline is not the hard and fast deadline from the state. That is a sense of urgency deadline where if we could get it done faster, this isn't a once a year adoption by the commissioners. As soon as they get it, they can go ahead and adopt it. Whereas like the comp plan, they can only do that, take that action once a year.
In terms of, like you were talking about how a lot of the maps are outdated, just from information, but like also ecology is changing, you know, like ecosystems change. How is the CAO, how does it evolve as the ecosystems evolve? Like, how does that information change?
We've actually been having some really good conversations with our geodata team about that. Because Snohomish County, I love the way they do it. They have their screens, like the maps essentially serve like screens. And then it tells us when a critical area review permit is required. What Snohomish County does though is by parcel, they will link any current reports that have been done. And so it's just kind of a way to say like, the screen said this, and then here's a report that is a lot more detailed that says this about this particular wetland, stream, or, you know, extent of a critical area. So we've been talking to our geodata team about how do we build that in. They just went through this whole migration to a different platform for geodata. And so they're gonna have to figure out how it works on a new platform, but that is something that we wanna capture. Now, when a permit comes in, staff is doing all that research. They're going and looking for reports on any surrounding sites and whatnot, but it's not available to the public. And when you start talking about regulations, it's really important to have whatever resources we can find internally available to the public.
Just a follow-up on that then. I just saw a really interesting map about critical areas that came out of the Audubon Society that was interactive and down to like the like I found my neighborhood on there in terms of, it showed the different ways it interacted with different stuff in real time. And that was a really handy public resource. Obviously that level of sophistication by like a nationwide organization is going to be a very different thing than what we can do, although we have very talented people here. But it would be interesting to have something that would be publicly available that people can actually like sort of see ahead of time.
We do, we have it. It's just whether it's reflecting the best available science.
Right,
So we do
yeah.
try to pull in outside data sources. And, you know, we have been discussing like, it might be helpful, not necessarily to go through the full Critical Areas Ordinance, but to have all of you go through what it's like to come to our permit counter.
Yeah, I was
It'd be
thinking
fun.
that.
And so we could have one of our permit counter specialists come and we could just pick and actually one of you would have to provide an address. I don't want to pick on anyone who isn't in this room, or I could provide an address. And then go through the process of what folks who come to our permit counter and all they want to know is, do I need a critical area review permit and what standards would apply? And and just let it go from there. Be part of the conversation.
Done by the end of 2026.
We'll just do one, just one. But I do think it would be helpful for you to just know how this gets applied on a piece of property. And, you know, I know our current planning team really wants to be more engaged on this. They're the ones that have to interact with it day in and day out and try to explain it to people. And if you're open to that, we could have someone come for just kind of a 30-minute session, because that's all you get at our permit counter really is 30 minutes.
It's even 20 minutes we have assigned.
20 minutes, like can we tell you in 20 minutes whether you need a critical area review permit and what standards might apply and what special reports you might need to get?
That's some kind of like bureaucratic athlete. That's fantastic.
It's hard, but other jurisdictions can do it. So that's the thing. You go to another jurisdiction, within 20 minutes, it's not a problem for them to be able to tell you like, yes, you're gonna need one, this is what you're gonna need, here are standards that apply. And so I think the challenge for us is, as we can have strong environmental protections here in this county, it's a big reason why people love this county, is, you know, all of the prairies and riparian areas and whatnot, but that doesn't mean that permits have to be as hard as they are, so. But is that like a thumbs up to invite our
Yes,
planner?
yes.
Okay, we'll do that.
That'll be
Never
fun.
role play.
Fun for them. Yeah, who wants to pretend to be the first, the applicant?
I will, I'll do it.
Nice.
I'll be really cranky too.
Well, please don't, no, we have new guidelines on how to treat our permit staff, because all they're doing is implementing code that got adopted in 2012.
Yeah.
So, now you don't have a unicorn parcel though, do you, Commissioner
No,
Kaiser?
no, I
Okay.
don't. I have all kinds of issues though.
Anyone
so
with a
be-
stream in their backyard would be the best. example.
Chair, member of the public would like to talk.
Can I just make a quick comment?
We don't take comment during the meetings, I'm sorry.
So this is kind of our last point, just with all the information and discussion that we've had so far. This is just prompting things to think about, both for our commissioners and for the public who are getting ready to engage with this, who are excited to engage. We're excited to engage. Your priorities for the update, your ideas, if you see something cool and exciting, you think is a good example, like the map that you were talking about, or if you read a cool report from a state agency and you want to make sure that we've got it on our radar, or you know something another jurisdiction is doing that you like, that kind of thing is great to bring to the table. Questions you have for us about the scope, what can and can't be in it, can this idea I have be part of this, that kind of thing. The purpose of either the update specifically or the CAO in general, is this for regulating blank? And the outcomes of the update, and what will this look like at the end, those kinds of questions. information, science, research you know about that can support the update. If you know interested parties or key contacts, you know people who work in industries that are affected or who are part of community groups that are interested in this, or experts on a certain topic that you think might want to come to planning commission, tell them, tell us. That's good information to bring. And then I know you all have been working on the comprehensive plan and are coming out of that process with a lot of environmental policy on the mind. So if there's ways that those policies, you could see them being implemented through this code. Again, this isn't necessarily a policy document like the comprehensive plan, but it is a way that our environmental goals get implemented. The comp plan backs up the CAO as it backs up all our code. It's the basis for all of it. So if there's any ideas about the way those things interact too, all that kind of stuff and more, anything else you think of, but this is just to get started on thinking about that engagement.
Yeah, like habitat corridors came up a lot.
Yeah.
In the comprehensive plan discussions. That isn't necessarily something that is reflected here and would probably take some additional research. But that's that linkage between establishing policies or vision and then trying to figure out ways that it can be implemented through regulations.
Yeah, and that's something like we have the ability to start with those baseline state requirements, but if there are points of interest and priority, like habitat connectivity corridors, that either the commission or the public or everyone we're engaging with throughout this process believes are important to include and consider in the process, we can then look at those if we receive that direction. So that's it. This is my contact information. And we also have a website set up that you'll get directed there if you type in thurstoncriticalareas.org, which is pretty fun. We will keep continuously adding information to that website. It'll be a source for updates, resources. You also
Public
have,
comments will be kept.
yes, public comments, all of that good stuff. We'll go through that website. It's got some baseline information on it now and it will continue to get updated throughout the update.
Is the current CAO on that too?
There's a link to it, yeah. And you can find that also by just searching Thurston County Code. It's Title 24. People want to be able to research that.
Are you hoping that just the way that this timeline will work is that we will finish one critical area and then do the next critical area and then do the next? And then when they're all done, that's when they are adopted as a bundle?
Yeah, essentially, that would be the plan, is to basically break down each section, which for the most part is going to be, here's the state guidance for wetlands, here's the state guidance for aquifer recharge areas, etc. And then there's also, of course, the procedures and permitting section of it, which is its own thing we got to tackle as well. Those are the major components of it. And so then, yes, we'll kind of in turn develop with you guys what we want to do with each of those critical areas, and then there will be a final product. Yeah.
I guess where I'm going with that is, and I don't understand exactly what you are going to get done, but from the outside, it seems to me that we would benefit from going through all the critical areas first, so we understand them very well, and then make the decisions about the building and permitting.
Yes,
And that'd be the last
I think that will probably
We're
be
gonna
the structure.
come back and do focused work sessions on each of the critical area types. And one of the things we want to hear from you is like, how much do you want to focus on each of those? Maybe less on one, more on another. And then we will take all that feedback and draft code, which will then come back to you. And probably piece by piece until we assemble a full public hearing draft that you can then review and we'll have a hearing. But we're still working out the finer points of exactly how we do this efficiently and without getting all the way down into the weeds and page by page, trying to avoid that.
Yeah, and what we're gonna come back with next time is a draft for that layout of, on these dates, we will come to you on wetlands, and on these dates, we will come present fish and wildlife habitat areas. And make sure that that aligns with the amount of time and effort you wanna spend on each of those. And that the order makes sense to everybody, and kind of work on that schedule together so that we're all kind of on the same boat as far as how this proceeds after this point. And then the actual nitty gritty and scope of each of those and what decisions get made, and how we approach them will happen at those projected meetings. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So what I'm hearing is this is not a update and make changes. This is a total rewrite.
It's a repeal and replace.
Right.
Yes, and so that is relevant to your question too about crosswalk earlier. I think probably why we don't want to do a crosswalk with the current code is just that it's repeal and replace. It's a new
Revisioning.
code.
It will be probably useful for us to have a crosswalk at the end of this process, just for the purposes of talking with, communicating it to the staff or to the public at large, and to the commissioners.
Yeah, and I think there is a level of information that we can go into with a crosswalk or something like a crosswalk, like that says like, here are the major point. Like, once we know what the biggest changes are, that could definitely be a point of communication. Like, if you are used to your wetlands functioning this way, here you go, now you know that they function this way, like that kind of major change.
We can probably do
communication.
high level crosswalks on topics like
That's-
this is
yes,
how this
that's
topic area is handled here and where those standards are located.
Yes.
This is how it's handled here and where they're located, and people can go and do that research in those areas, but we're not going to, you know, draw arrows from every line of text in the current one, say this is how it's either addressed now or not addressed at all, but we'll do the best we can to help people contextualize what's changing.
Yeah, thank you. That was way more concise.
Claire, who's gonna hold the pen, actually hold the pen? Are there gonna be different authors for the different chapters, or who's actually writing?
Mostly me, Andy. Yeah. I mean, mostly me.
Okay.
And then I've got my, supervisors on my support team.
Gotcha.
Andy and Derek, but yeah, it's like a fairly small core team, and then we also know that we have plenty of folks on staff who can give input on individual sections. I mean, we have a whole water resources team. Obviously, current planning is gonna be great for input on permits. So we'll be kind of doing our own, like, it's sort of like community engagement but for our own county staff on those things, but at the end of the day, the writing is by the core team, which is primarily me, so.
So do we have some kind of a framework for prioritizing the 5 critical areas?
Not yet.
That is what the intent of the next session would be, so if there are ones that you think need a lot of discussion, I guess
I was
for
trying to figure out,
example
like, what's the
would be.
model for doing that prioritizing, Cause I
Yeah,
can see
think
how,
it is the level of discretion and the complexity of the guidance, and we can provide information on that.
And I don't think there's a inherent prioritization of those different categories. We're
Yeah.
required by state law to
do
identify
all
and
of them.
protect
Yeah.
all of them.
Yeah.
correct, okay.
But this body and the public and the board all have different thoughts of what is most important to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in this stage of planning
Yeah.
commission, we'll be prioritizing what you want to hear about most while addressing everything at some level.
And maybe another way of thinking about it, aside from prioritizing, because they are all deemed important by the state and they're all important to the function of our environment, is to think about which ones just need more time due to the complexity of the research or because they're of high interest to the public. I know like the big visible ones like wetlands and streams are generally of like pretty high interest. So those might take more times as opposed to flood areas where for the most part, the guidance is pretty straightforward. It comes from FEMA hazard mitigation issue for the most part. There's still discretion to be had there. There's still time to a need to discuss and focus on it, but it might not be as advanced as discussing an issue like how stream buffers are determined.
So what I'm hearing is a complexity metric is probably the best way to gauge where we're
Yeah,
focusing.
Because when we're coming with the schedule next time, the main thing we want to determine is, does this need to come to planning commission for one meeting or does it need to come to 2 or 3? Like,
Right.
like what is the length of time we need to spend discussing each of these?
Predict at the
I can
outset.
say that I hear from the public by far the most about wetlands.
We noticed with the comp plan that we ended up talking a lot about a couple issues that ended up touching a lot of other ones, like the climate we ended up spending so much time on, in large part because it touched everything else. Wetlands do seem like they're a little bit of that, but it would be probably the degree of interconnection is also as important as like the complexity of the situation itself.
Yeah, and it's a little different from the comp plan in the sense that each of these critical areas are designated and regulated pretty separately. While they physically do overlap in the environment, the way that they get reviewed and regulated is kind of by that specific critical area. That's how it's set up from the state, is that they're chunked into those categories. The regulation specific to each category will be kind of focused on that.
Next.
I think the thing that we have to consider here is which ones have the biggest change, and that's where we're gonna have to, and which ones have the biggest change in best available science.
Yeah.
You know, we pretty much all understand how a lot of these critical areas have functioned forever, and the available science on it probably haven't changed much. It sounds like some of them have changed a lot.
I think it's dried fruit, not cold, so you're good.
Yeah, I think the ones with the biggest change are gonna be wetlands and fish and wildlife habitat areas. There is some with geologic hazards, like I mentioned, with the DNR mapping and stuff like that, but I think those two are probably gonna be the ones with the most change and the most complex change.
Wildlife is actually what I was thinking about in that context, because it's discussing all of the other
Yeah,
habitats.
and that one is also one that, you know, takes discussion. That's the one that I think interacts most, maybe besides wetlands, with our other plans and programs like the Shoreline Master Program and the Habitat Conservation.
We'll have a lot of help and framework because, you know, you can look at if it's listed by the federal government as threatened or endangered, if it's a priority habitat and species identified by the state, those are the ones that we're gonna absolutely have to include.
Yeah.
And then we can have those conversations about other species and habitats of local importance that may be out there.
Yeah, I think that's a good example for the structure of the process and discussion in general. We have things that we know, like a list of priority habitats and species and federally endangered species. And then we also have room for discretion. Are there any other species of local importance that are important to us? That's a good example of the types of questions that we could come. So we would present to you, here are the list of species and habitats that we know need to be protected. Here's the guidance for protecting them. Here are options. Here's maybe what we currently do that are things we have currently listed as species of local importance. Here's what nearby jurisdictions do, or examples from other jurisdictions, what their species of local importance looks like. Where do we land on that continuum of where there is discretion, beyond those like just hard baselines that we know.
So I think that's a good place to wrap this up. Well over time.
Well, just one more comment. I did a quick Gemini search for what are some of the Washington counties with most advanced CAOs. You'll be happy to know that Thurston comes up number 3, behind Kitsap and King.
Infallible Gemini.
It's one of the longest. County actually might.
Yeah, I'm sure there's this.
Okay.
Now we can be done.
Thank you.
Staff updates.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I don't have any. Ashley, do you have any staff updates?
Has anyone mentioned the new senior planner coming online?
I think Anna did last time,
Okay.
2 weeks ago. Do you wanna-
Okay,
Nick? Yes. Nick?
calendar. Is anybody not going to be here on October 1st?
Already talking about October.
Yeah.
We have tentatively no topics, so.
Well, we could potentially do the current planning exercise.
That'd be fun.
I think it's gonna take, it might take a little bit longer to start doing the gather.
Yeah, we're
information.
planning on the second one in October for the next like CAO, for the scheduled planning session for CAO.
It could be a relatively short one, but it could be focused on what is it like coming to our planning.
That'd be really useful.
And anybody that's not available on October 15th. It looks like we've got quorums both those nights. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
Just like to point out, there was a great article in the Nisqually Valley News last week from Commissioner Fournier on the comprehensive plan. Y'all might want to take a look at it. Very well written and
It ran in the Centralia Chronicle as well.
did it.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really good.
I read most of what he writes. He writes pretty regularly in there, but that was one of the better ones.
Yeah, so the next and last briefing with the board will be on housing. It did get moved, got bumped to hopefully September 24th, fingers crossed, next week.
Do we know when Black Lake Quarry and Martin Way rezone are going to public hearing yet?
It is just given the calendar, it's either gonna be November 18th or the following board meeting that'll be going to
Late
hearing.
November?
So we're working on getting all the briefing materials ready for the board.
Mhm.
And it will be packaged with Martin Way,
Yeah.
because
Do
we do
you-
have one rezone from last year that
Do you remember if you're doing or if you have a Black Lake Quarry board work sessions scheduled
we do
yet?
not have one scheduled yet.
Okay, and you're not
But-
doing another one for Martin Way, are you?
No, the intention is to package them together and have the board review a package of rezones
Oh.
and do that moving forward as well.
Oh, okay.
So there will, technically, there have to be two separate hearings, but presenting it as a package. So
In the
it's
work
like-
session together.
Yeah, like, I think it'll be easier for them to follow along, if they're presented. And we really are supposed to look at cumulative impacts.
Yeah.
From land use amendments and rezones, so. No better time to start than now. They're in very different places of the county, so.
If you guys do get that on the calendar, can you send out notice to us?
Yeah, we can do that. Actually, September, speaking of which, permit review process update does have a work session currently scheduled for September 24th. With a hearing tentatively scheduled for November 18th, but that's far enough out that it could shift.
Thank you.
Anybody else? 8 o'clock and we're adjourned.
Technically 10 o'clock for me. I'm 2 time zones over right now, but have a lovely night, y'all.
Good job, Commissioner Nelson. For stepping up.
You brought it right